WOL Washington, WPRS HD2 Waldorf, WKYS HD2 Washington, WMMJ HD2 Bethesda, a Radio 1 station, and worldwide at WOLDCnews.com.
The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.
Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell is sponsored by Equity Resource, a development, construction, and investment firm that is transforming properties throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Our mission is to develop properties at a high level of value, a low risk of investment, while providing impeccable service to our customers. When you're ready to sell, renovate, or invest in a property, choose Equity Resource. Call us today at 202-621-6632 or visit our website, equityresource.net.
Good morning and welcome to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Now for today's show. Here's attorney Ethel Mitchell.
Good morning and welcome. I am your host, attorney Ethel Mitchell. Welcome to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Welcome to all who are listening. The police department, the fire department.
It's really the same pattern, Ethel. I mean, the other interesting thing when you look now at Metro and of course the problems we're seeing with Metro, and we can talk about a more recent case about Metro, but back in 1969-70, the subway was just being built, and one of the first things we did at the Lawyers Committee was to look at who's building the subway. I mean, this is at that point the metropolitan area had 30% of the residents were African American. But if you looked at the unions, whether you're looking at the sheet metal union, the iron workers, the electricians union, they had virtually no African American members, and in many cases they had policies that seemed to have been established directly to lead to the likely employment of the relatives of current employees.
Okay.
Or their friends.
Nepotism, right?
Yes. And so there were challenges filed against half a dozen or more of these major unions where some of these statistics were so terrible. Ultimately, all of those cases were resolved. Excellent. And the Lawyers Committee also became very much involved in an effort to impose requirements on contractors that they employ a fair number of people from minority groups, African Americans in particular. That was known as the Washington Plan that was created around 1970. It ultimately had the effect of changing, to a large degree, the composition of these unions. It opened up opportunities that really had never existed before. But to your point, very often the cases that were started there took years to conclude. They were bitterly fought by the unions, and sometimes by contractors.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you've come to bring this true black history, because a lot of people have the mistaken notion that, Thurgood Marshall did the Brown versus Board of Education case, and that was it. Everything opened up, and everybody was happy, and that's how everything happened. But it didn't happen like that.
No, in fact, in driving to your studio this morning, I went by Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and one of the first cases we ever did was on behalf of a class of African-American employees at Walter Reed who were facing the same issues. It's a federal facility. Yeah. They couldn't be promoted, African-American scientists, workers in other categories. And I think, again, picking up on what you just said, I think it's really important for your listeners to understand that while we were fortunate to find lawyers to bring these cases, these cases really came about because of the incredible efforts and the courage, really, of the employee leaders who, at great personal sacrifice and danger in terms of their own jobs, stepped forward to organize their fellow employees. And that's what made these cases work. I see. There were task forces of workers. There was a group called United Blacks Against Discrimination at Walter Reed. There was NOAA Employees Against Discrimination. NASA Employees Against Discrimination.
Really?
a large and effective group of African American workers at the Library of Congress, which is another place where a lot of work had to be done. And these were the folks that essentially drove these cases forward.
Somebody needs to write this history. They really do. That is wonderful. We have to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to come to the present and talk about what's going on right now, if you don't mind. Sure. And then I'm going to open the phone lines up for people to call if they have any questions. Okay. Thank you. We'll be back in a few minutes.
1450 WOL, where information is power.
Do you have a Mercedes-Benz? And are you looking for a place that specializes in servicing luxury cars? Magic Benz Services USA, located at 4716 Baltimore Avenue, Hyattsville, Maryland, is the place. They are the premier specialists with up to 40% off dealer prices and 100% satisfaction guarantee, offering professional services to keep your Mercedes running, like transmission services, brake services, complete engine services, tire replacement, balance and rotation, engine cooling system flush, battery and charging system check or replacement, fuel induction services, wheel alignment, used car pre-purchase inspection, and much, much more. The oil changes are only $99 with a free car wash. That's right, free car wash with your purchase of their $99 oil change service. So call for your appointment today, 1-888-505-6917. That's 1-888-505-6917. Or get to MagicBenzService.com. Ride with no worries.
Remember when a small business needed a landline? Today, the world is your office with Grasshopper, the entrepreneur's phone system. On the road, at the beach, or at home, Grasshopper helps you grow your business with all the features of a business phone system and the freedom of a cell phone. Features include multiple extensions for your team, calls forwarded to your mobile phones, voicemails transcribed and emailed, and so much more. See how it works at grasshopper.com, the entrepreneur's phone system.
Welcome, NBA fans. Tonight's NBA
Man, nothing beats seeing an NBA game in person. Hey, buddy, thanks again for driving. So, where are our seats?
Oh, we're sitting right around the corner. Hey, but before we do anything, let me stop for a second at the designated driver booth and make the pledge.
Excuse me, sir. Did you say designated driver?
Yeah, I'm the designated driver tonight.
Congratulations. You are a winner. And for being the designated driver and always buckling up, every trip, every time, you have won the adoration of your friends and family who will get home safely from the game.
Cool.
Your prize also includes the gratitude of all of the drivers on the road who won't have to fear for their lives. And finally, you've won the chance to follow your favorite NBA team to the NBA Finals because responsibility has its rewards.
Woo! Yeah!
To find out more, visit the designated driver booth at the arena or visit rhir.org. A message from this station and Team Coalition.
News Talk 1450 WOL-AM, where information is power.
Welcome back. Welcome back. You're listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. We have as our guest Attorney Roderick Boggs, the director of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. Rod, you were telling us about the incredible history of the work that the committee has done. And during the break, we talked about housing discrimination and so forth. Tell us now about some of the work that you're doing right now.
Sure. I mean, the Lawyers Committee has been consistent, as I said, in focusing on employment questions, certainly on matters of race discrimination. But over the years, our agenda has broadened to take on protection of other groups of people that have gained protection of the civil rights law. And certainly women have been protected for a long time, and we've had some of the most important sex discrimination cases, whether it's sexual harassment or on the workplace or just denials of equal opportunity in terms of promotions. But we've also done a lot of work on national origin discrimination. We're doing that now in terms of wage theft matters, particularly involving newcomer workers in restaurants and fast food establishments. We have been very active also since the early 90s on issues of discrimination against people with disabilities, whether it's in regard to employment or public accommodations. or housing, and that's become a big part of what we're doing. But I think, in a way, the two most significant initiatives that have meant a lot to us outside of the traditional areas of housing, employment, public accommodations have probably been in relationship to education and, more recently, prisoners' rights. One of the first cases we actually got involved in back in the early 1970s, during a period when thousands of people were being arrested in D.C., almost all of them African American, for drug possession. And when the drug wars, as we now commonly refer to them, were beginning, with this enormous change in increasing penalties and longer sentences and for people possessing drugs, we saw that problem in the early 70s as one where perhaps this should not be a criminal justice matter. There were people who were addicted to drugs, really needed was treatment. And we brought a lawsuit in the early 70s challenging the drug laws as they were being applied to people who were medically addicted. We basically made the argument that if someone was addicted to heroin, it was no different than being addicted to alcohol.
Right.
And to sentence someone to prison without first making every effort to provide treatment for them really was inappropriate and unconstitutional. We brought that case and argued it strenuously before the highest court in the district, and came within one vote of a decision that would have, I think, fundamentally transformed drug laws.
So much.
And what's interesting there is that if you want to know what we're doing today, we also brought many cases in the early 70s challenging conditions in prisons, overcrowding issues, the requirement of providing adequate medical attention to people in prison, challenging the way in which good time or credit for good behavior is used to let people be released sooner. Those issues were all raised in a preliminary way in the early 70s, but we could not sustain that work. There wasn't funding to do it, and some of these challenges were unsuccessful. That is why we are so really happy to see that now, 30, 40 years later, our project of working with different groups in town, certainly looking at criminal justice issues and representing hundreds of inmates who are now scattered throughout the United States. We no longer have a local prison, which we had in Lorton Reformatory. There are 5,000 district residents now in federal prisons all over the United States, in 30 states. It's far from home, far from any opportunity to really communicate effectively with their friends and their children and relatives. But the fact that we're seeing this now, and as I think your listeners all know, drug enforcement has been almost exclusively directed toward the African American community, certainly here in the district. And there are 5,000 up until recently arrests a year for marijuana possession. 90%
marijuana?
Of them,
goodness.
90% of them have been African Americans. And the Lawyers Committee became part of the effort to examine these laws. And really, in the summer of 2013, we issued a report looking at the arrest disparities in district racially. And we did it with the advice, which I think was a very wise thing for us to do, of a panel of senior and retired judges.
Wow.
These are the very people who had been required by their oaths of office to enforce these laws as officers of the court. And they all agreed, these are some of the most prestigious judges that we have, that these laws, these disparities were unconscionable. 90% of the people, or 80% were arrested in D.C. of the 35,000, 40,000 people arrested every year were for nonviolent offenses.
Wow.
In other words, we were criminalizing all sorts of behavior that should be better dealt with in other ways. The marijuana situation just stood out as the most obvious example of that. And what is so gratifying is that, as I think you know, the D.C. Council, in the end of 2013, essentially decriminalized marijuana by statute, allowing people to possess certain amounts of it, and with a fine being the only penalty, and that essentially began to put a real hold in the policy of the police stopping people randomly, almost always in African American neighborhoods, which created this problem. Now, of course, D.C. voters, as you know, last year voted in, I think, a very wise, progressive way to go beyond decriminalization to actually legalize possession and growth on a personal basis of marijuana. Well, this represents a remarkable change of public opinion in general, but particularly it shows really the evolution of thinking within the African American community in particular, because those measures were supported in every ward in the city by significant margins, and it would not have been true, I can almost guarantee you, if that same question was put to people back in the 70s.
In the 70s,
where there really was a feeling that the drug laws were designed to, to protect
the criminal. People. Right. But now you still have some cases, I understand, where you are trying to protect D.C. prisoners who are scattered all over the country.
Well,
because I saw a report where you said there's also a problem not only with so many people still being arrested and being sent all over the place, but also when they come back home, they can't get any kind of jobs and so on. Tell us what the committee's doing about that.
Well, as a sort of follow-up to the report we did on the disparities in arrest, again, using the same panel of judges and our own staff and the help of law firms, a few months ago, last fall, we wrote a report looking at the collateral consequences. In other words, what happens to you? What problems do you have if you have been arrested or convicted in terms of what occurs to you in your civil life?
Okay. Hold on just a moment, Rod. We have a caller on the line, I understand. Hello? Yes. Hello? Good morning.
Good morning to you and your guests. You know what is more disturbing about these drug laws? I had a professor named Professor Dr. Paul Williams. He talked about Operation Gladio, which was started after the OSS, which was the beginning of the CIA. And what they did, the CIA went into Asia.
We don't have a lot of time. Do you have a question for my guest?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the government, CIA, in order to obtain money, became drug dealers and got the mafia to put the drugs into the black neighborhoods, and then the government made the drugs illegal, the war on drugs, which was actually a war on black people. But it was the U.S. federal government, and they are still the ones that's participating in this drug war on black people.
Okay, thank you. Rod, do you want to comment on that?
Honestly,
I know you've probably heard it before.
I've heard that. I don't know. What I think we can safely say is that the drug laws, were established over a period of time and became increasingly strong. They certainly have had the impact that the caller is talking about, but at the same time, I'm a little dubious that the CIA, in any certainly concerted way over time, had much to do with promoting drug traffic, because, as you know, one of the things that's been going on for years is the expenditure of billions of dollars to try to stop the drug traffic. The government is spending huge amounts of money both overseas as well as here, and I think one of the unfortunate consequences of the drug policy of the United States right now is that it isn't really helping our foreign policy very much either, because it is creating essentially criminal networks and almost guaranteeing their perpetuation as long as we have a market here for drugs.
Right. Well, tell us a little more about what you're doing for D.C. prisoners.
Well, what we're doing now, having written this report that looks at the ways in which people with criminal records are being denied or can be denied employment and housing, we're attempting now to educate people, and we have begun to litigate in cases. One suit in particular that's pending against WMATA, which has a very stringent policy against employing people with virtually any criminal records, even if the record has no relationship to the job. And for example, in this case, we represent one individual who would like to be, I believe, an operator for the for Metro, or driver, who had been without any blemishes on his record, a driver for over a decade for a contractor of Metro. But when he went to try to transfer into the regular employment roles, he was turned down because of a conviction over 25 years ago, which had no relationship to the ability to do the job. And we think that that's really inappropriate. And because there is no direct protection here, we have to rely on the coverage, as we interpret the laws, of having an effect on African Americans, because they make up a disproportionate number of people with these problems to start with.
Okay. When we come back after break, we're gonna I'm gonna give out the phone number again, and so people can call in and ask questions. But we'll continue to talk about this. Thank you very much. We'll be back.
1450 WOL, where information is power.
Psst. Yeah, it's me, your heart. Listen to me. We've got to talk. High blood pressure is serious, and yours? Whoa. What happened to us? We used to be so much more active. But lately you've been ignoring me. I know you think I'm just gonna keep ticking away forever, but you're wrong. You can do so much more to control your high blood pressure. Doing the minimum isn't doing enough. I'm under a lot of pressure and can quit whenever I want. Bet you didn't know that. But I like my job. Just treat me better. Check on me. Give me something green to nibble on every once in a while. And maybe we can do some exercise on occasion. Let's get to it. After all, we're in this together.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
When I grow up, I want to be a glass countertop in a new home.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's best birthday present.
When I grow up, I want to be a football stadium.
When I grow up, I want to be a warm fleece on a cold day.
When I grow up, I want to be a fancy backsplash.
I want to be a bike that races around the country.
When I grow up, I want to be a bench on a forest trail.
I want to be a rocking chair on a sunny porch.
I want to be a skyscraper.
I want to be When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. A public service advertisement brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
Welcome, NBA fans. Tonight's NBA
Man, nothing beats seeing an NBA game in person. Hey, buddy, thanks again for driving. So, where are our seats?
Oh, we're sitting right around the corner. Hey, but before we do anything, let me stop for a second at the designated driver booth and make the pledge.
Excuse me, sir. Did you say designated driver?
Yeah, I'm the designated driver tonight.
Congratulations. You are a winner. And for being the designated driver and always buckling up every trip, every time, you have won the adoration of your friends and family who will get home safely from the game.
Cool.
Your prize also includes the gratitude of all of the drivers on the road who won't have to fear for their lives. And finally, you've won the chance to follow your favorite NBA team to the NBA Finals.
News Talk 1450 WOL-AM, where information is power.
Welcome back. You're listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. I'm your host, Attorney Ethel Mitchell. The phone lines are open now. We're talking with Attorney Roderick Boggs of the Washington Lawyers Committee. If you have a question, you can call in to 1-800-450-7876. That's 1-800-450-7876. Attorney Boggs, tell us a bit more about what's going on right now in terms of your new cases involved with housing vouchers. But before we start, I understand we have another caller on the line. Hello?
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes.
My name is Ajamu, and I am grateful that you have the director of the Lawyers Committee on. It is a very talented group of lawyers. I would like to ask him what type of precedent-setting litigation they have done recently, as far as dealing with like these draconian drug laws, and does he think there's a possibility to bring a 13th Amendment badge of slavery or incident of slavery claim against these types of policies that wherein your actual record for petty crime is a badge of slavery that prevents you from getting jobs and taking care of yourself?
Okay, thank you. Good question.
Well,
Ron?
I think in regard to precedent-setting litigation, and it obviously has behind it the enforcement statutes in the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which were based on the 13th Amendment, really is the challenge I mentioned earlier to what's going on first with Metro, to try to really provide some level of recognition that because the laws prohibiting employment of people with criminal records falls with highly disproportionate effect on the African American community, they therefore become subject to legal attack. That's basically what is going on in the case against Metro. Another thing I think would be useful for your listeners to know is that there is a type of legislation that the Lawyers Committee has supported. It is weaker than we'd like it to be, but it involves something called ban the box, and that is now in the law in the District of Columbia. That means employers are not allowed to ask applicants about their criminal records until after they've gotten through a first level of scrutiny. In other words, you can't be automatically rejected because you checked a box that said you've been arrested or have been convicted. We think that's an important first step toward making employers pay attention to the merits of an individual's qualifications and not some standard which may have nothing to do with the job. The problem with this legislation in the district, it does not provide a cause of action to go to court. You can complain about it, and people might have to stop it, but it doesn't really give you, a right to enforce it. Baltimore has passed a similar statute recently that does provide that protection, allows someone to bring a lawsuit on the basis of it, and we would like to see the law in the district strengthened. Until that happens, though, we are very interested in talking to people who are returning citizens, people with criminal records, because the key to moving all of these things forward at this point is going to be having the affected community of people organized to demand further reforms.
And let me give you his phone number again, since because if anybody listening has experienced this type of situation and would like to reach out to the Lawyers Committee, you can do so by calling them at 202-319-1000. That's 202-319-1000, or emailing them at WLC@washlaw.org.
Ethel, if I may, let me suggest, although we will certainly try to respond to phone calls, the best way to reach us is electronically by email. And if someone, for example, has a complaint, there's a way to file that complaint and make a request for help directly on the website.
Oh, very good. Okay, so I hope all who are listening and who are either are experiencing these types of things or know somebody who's experiencing these types of things will follow up with this. I think we have another phone call. Hello?
Hello. I just wanted his number to contact him. Are they court-appointed lawyers?
No. We the way the Lawyers Committee operates, we review cases. We help where we can. If it's a case we think we can actually help with directly, we will try to find a lawyer who is free. We're working as a volunteer, but we're not a court-appointed program.
Right. Maybe you can also explain just very briefly, and then we'll get back to the subject matter, how these major law firms have helped you over the years? I mean, how do you staff this? Because if you get over 1,000 complaints a year, that's a lot of work.
The Lawyers Committee staff consists of about 10 lawyers, some of whom are senior lawyers volunteering, others are junior lawyers, being paid a modest salary. But the reason we're able to accomplish as much as we do, and we're talking about 50,000 hours of legal representation a year, is because as many as 80 of the major firms in Washington contribute the time of their lawyers to work on our cases. Because we are providing them with well-developed cases, it saves them the need to go through elaborate screening and assures that they're getting cases that are worthy of their time.
I see. Very good. Very good. So let's talk now about. Let's move from the criminal section or the section having to do with persons who are experiencing discrimination because of their prison records to housing vouchers. What is going on with that? Because that affects a lot of people. Please.
Well, I think this is important. I mean, fair housing, the ability to rent or buy housing has been protected by federal law going back to 1968, a law that was strengthened in 1968. One of the coverages, not in that law, but in the District of Columbia's laws, is protection against discrimination based on the source of your income. In other words, if you're getting support of a housing choice voucher, of which there are thousands available in the district, although there's a waiting list, you cannot be turned away for renting because the landlord says, I won't include the voucher in calculating your income and your eligibility to actually qualify to rent that apartment. Over the last 8 years, the Lawyers Committee, with its primary client ally, the Equal Rights Center, has been involved in investigations, often involving testing, namely calling apartment and calling real estate companies and finding out if they will take vouchers. Unfortunately, when this process began back 7 or 8 years ago, 80% of the landlords in the district who are obligated under district law to accept vouchers were rejecting them. And it was the opinion of the Fair Housing Council and Equal Rights Center that this was often a proxy for race. In other words, since more African Americans than white people in the district have the vouchers, it would necessarily fall more on them. But what we really found, particularly in certain neighborhoods, if an African American presented himself or herself with a voucher, they'd be turned down and told it's because they don't take vouchers. Now, that has led to a lot of litigation in the district to address that, and virtually every one of these cases has been successful. But the problem, of course, is most people with vouchers, since don't know that they're protected in this way, and of course, which is true generally of housing discrimination, whether it's in the area of sales or rentals, generally people are not turned away or declined business because someone says it's your race. They're told there's nothing available or there's some other excuse. Since the early 80s, it's been possible, as a result of a case that the Lawyers Committee was involved in, to use testers, black and white checkers, to look into the practices followed by different real estate companies and brokers. And these types of tests have unearthed enormous amounts of discrimination over time. And because the Supreme Court in 1982 said that a fair housing organization could bring lawsuit against a company that was discriminating, and the testers themselves, the black and white checkers, had the ability also to bring a case, there's been a very powerful tool available nationally to attack housing discrimination. That was the most resistant form of discrimination. It was one of the last forms of discrimination that was protected by federal legislation. It only happened shortly after the death of Dr. Martin Luther King. And, it is obviously a very important right. It has to be constantly watched and protected.
It's amazing for us who now live in Washington, D.C. to realize that black people could not buy houses in Northwest D.C. until those cases. I mean, you talked about a case during the break that you all brought.
Well, an example would be we brought a case in Northwest D.C. back in the in the middle 70s. I mean, this was after the fair housing laws had been passed, but before this authority of testing to be used was established, where an African American doctor attempted to buy a home in Northwest D.C. Her agent, or his agent, who was African American, was told, "Well, your client wouldn't be comfortable living in this neighborhood," which, of course, made absolutely no sense.
Mm-hmm.
He already knew he would be comfortable there.
Yeah, yeah.
That lawsuit ultimately was won, but it was won because the real estate agent was able to support the claim, the African American referring agent. But those types of cases in those days would be resolved, if at all, for very limited money and often with great difficulty. Since the Supreme Court's authorization of testing, these cases have become a lot easier to bring, and the amount of money that would be awarded in them has gone up exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
But housing discrimination still remains one of the most resistant forms of discrimination that we encounter in the region. And the source of income discrimination protection, which is an important part of the problem, unfortunately, is not illegal federally and not in most jurisdictions.
Wow. Wow. You're listening to Attorney Roderick Boggs of the Washington Lawyers Committee. If you have an interest in a situation, or you have a situation that you may want them to look into, you can give them a call at 202-319-1000. Attorney Boggs has indicated it's better to email them, so if you have access to that, there is a form on their website, which is washlaw.org. That's WASHLAW.org, where you can fill out and give the facts of your situation, and they can at least provide you with some type of assistance. And I think that's a great service there. Lastly, we're almost running out of time, but can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with public education, Rod?
Yes, I will. The district, as many of you know, has faced challenges with its public schools for many, many years. The Lawyers Committee has believed for almost 40 years that trying to improve as much as possible the D.C. public schools for every child was a critical priority, and that's involved our representation for many years of a citywide coalition of parents called Parents United that fought for improved schools, adequate funding. Over the last 15 years or so, we have been very much involved in getting law firms to work with the regular public schools by providing partnerships to give them mentoring, tutoring, other services, and we are now working very closely with the school chancellor, Kaya Henderson, to try to bring those types of services into every school, particularly in neighborhoods where parental engagement is not at the level we'd like and where the concentrations of children of great need is very high.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You're listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. You can access this program in about a week. It's going to be archived on my website, lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com. We are talking right now with Attorney Boggs of the Washington Lawyers Committee. If you have a real quick question, you can call us at 1-800-450-7876. That's 1-800-450-7876. The time always goes by so quickly, but Attorney Boggs, can you leave us with a few last words?
Well, I guess what I'd like mainly to say, Ethel, is it's a pleasure to be with you. I think you're providing an extremely valuable service to the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think one of the greatest really needs in this whole area of civil rights is to educate the public about what their rights are. And I'd also say that whether we're talking about returning citizens or improving our schools or just generally improving the state of civil rights, it's the involvement of people in the community really that is fundamental to making the ball move in the right direction. And
yes.
We have been very fortunate to work with groups like the NAACP in particular and other community organizations, parent organizations in the schools. We want to continue that. That is key.
Good,
but your program is a big help in making that reality.
Well, thank you very much. And that's the whole objective of this program, is to educate and provide resources for people that they can actually use Again, I'm going to give your number out one more time. It's 202-319-1000. The website is washlaw.org. Please, if any of my listeners have situations that you think should be looked into, should be at least investigated, whether it has to do with discrimination in housing, public education, returning citizens who have served their time in jail and are facing discrimination, or disability, or immigrant rights and so forth like that, sexual discrimination, right, please contact the Washington Lawyers Committee because they are there. They have been doing this for 40-odd years now. And they have a tremendous cadre of legal help to help you with. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rod, for coming. And we're going to have you back, I believe. I think we're definitely going to have you back. Next week, we're going to continue our series having to do with the law and Black history. I am 90% sure, I'll put it like that I will have Attorney John Cummings and Dr. Seck on from the Whitney Plantation. I would encourage my listeners to Google the Whitney Plantation. It is a plantation outside of New Orleans that is the only plantation in the country that focuses on the community and the plight of slavery, on plantations from the viewpoint of slaves. So Dr. Seck wrote an incredible book that I'm trying to get through right now about the life of the community of slaves on this particular plantation in Louisiana. There's a book called Slave Codes that I found on Amazon. So if any of my listeners, and I do hope that some of my listeners, especially the younger as well as the older ones, are interested in this, the history really does need to be told. And the truth and the information, as difficult as it is to look at, needs to come out. And as Kathy Hughes says with this program and her stations, information is power, and it's time for us to know the truth about the law and Black people. So we're going to continue our series next week where we will be investigating what is a very difficult subject to talk about, but we need to know it. We need to know it because it impacts. I was reading some of the book on slave codes this morning, and it is the precursor to Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin. That was going on in the 1700s and the 1800s and the 1900s. And I think if we see it as what it is, a continuation of a situation in our life that the law has not really corrected even yet, we'll be in a better position to really address it as it needs to be. This is Attorney Ethel Mitchell for Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Continue to listen in. As I say to everyone, law really is powerful. It can help you or it can hurt you. We've enjoyed this particular program. I hope you have as well. Go to the website, lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com. All of the programs are archived there. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so, they will also be podcast. So you can, we're getting fancy, as we go along here, so that if you missed it, not only can you listen to a program, you'll be able to download it and listen to it at your leisure. Have a good week, and we will be with you next week. Have a good week. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 9 a.m. for another informative broadcast. To reach Attorney Mitchell, you may do so by calling 202-772-1988. That's 202-772-1988. Or log on to her website, www.lawtalkwithethelmitchell.com.